o'clock, if we're all good, I will call to order the regular Board of Selectmen meeting for Tuesday, August 12th. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Great. Next up is for Selectmen's updates. I don't think there's too much to update on. Really just status quo for the town. We're getting into the final weeks of summer. Exciting. We're going to be doing the ribbon cutting for the new school next week. So Neck River will be officially open. So that's really exciting. And so I encourage people to go to the school Board of Education website to find out. I think they're going to be having some community events so that the public can go through the school at one point before it opens officially. School starts the day after Labor Day this year, which is a little unusual for us, but because of all the changes going on in the district, they needed a little extra wiggle room to make sure that everything's up and running. But I know that it's been very busy with moves, completing work at Brown. I know they were doing parking lot work. So lots of activities at the schools, and just excited to see things kick off for the new school year with lots of changes in town. And we also have beachcombers this week. So downtown is always a really fun time to attend our beachcomber event that the Chamber of Commerce hosts. That's Thursday, starting I think at 4:30 or 5 o'clock. So just note that there will be a lot of activity downtown, and I think they do court off Wall Street for a period of time for that for pedestrians only. So with that, any liaison reports or selectmen comments?
Thursday, as a matter of fact, is my 32nd wedding anniversary. So the likelihood of me being at Beachcombers may be little, but we'll see how that goes.
Well, they
I want
do have a nice parade around. You can get sips of champagne and
There you
wine.
go. There you go. Like pregame. So I was at the school yesterday and got a chance to walk around a little bit just to amplify your point, Peggy. It's beautiful. It really looks awesome. Starting to see the teachers moving in and just the buzz and the energy and the principals waving to everybody, and it was pretty cool to see. And I still saw some of the folks from the construction company walking around, not in hard hats anymore, which was pretty cool. So it was great. It was really fun to see.
Great. Any other reports? I know there hasn't been a lot of meetings in August. People usually take them off.
Now, I'll
So-
just expand on the Beachcomber. Wall Street will be shut down. There will be many, many food trucks. And then all along Route 1 and Wall Street, there will be many adult beverage distributors and companies represented. So
Nice.
your wristband really does get you a pretty cool experience. Not only can you see the shops and all of the things that Madison has to offer, in that light, you can also have a wonderful anniversary date night with all the food trucks.
Bruce, how much is the wristband this year? Is it 10, 15? It's 15. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, cool. It's a bargain. That really is a bargain.
Yeah.
It is.
Okay, well, good. We'll move on. We got a lot to talk about today. So I guess we'll start off with citizens' comments. And obviously we're all Zoom today. So if there's any hands raised and you'd like to make a public comment, please do so now.
No hands are raised.
And just so
Okay.
we're all aware, we did receive a comment this morning via our email from Charlie Layberger.
Okay.
Is it one we should read or just read later?
I could read it right now. He did attach some photos and a PDF with a plan that he's describing. But in his email, he says, "Good morning, Madison Board of Selectmen. I would like to submit comment on item 8 for today's agenda about the bicycle pedestrian master plan." I'm just moving my screen so I can see a little better. The proposed sidewalk from Polson and Hand schools will take large portions of front yards and do irreparable damage to beautiful neighborhoods along the route. 2, to cross the Neck River along Green Hill. A horrible looking, expensive truss bridge is in the town plan. 3, and there is a better solution with a short direct route from Hand to Neck River. And he says, see my attached fully described plan, contact me for further discussion or to make a presentation to the Board of Selectmen. And that is from Charlie Layberger at 37 Kimberly Lane.
Okay, great, thank you. So with that, we will move on to item number 6. I'd like to make a motion to present or to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any further comments or questions? All right, with that, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. Item number 7 is an introduction to the Connecticut Redevelopment Authority by Executive Director David Corus. And David, I think, is ready to join us online with a presentation. A little background, this was set up by the governor's office to incentivize and create kind of, and he can explain it better, a partnership with municipalities in terms of improving housing development as well as other development in downtowns. And a lot of our neighboring communities are seriously taking a look at this or have actually joined already. And I think it's something that we as a town should also be looking at. I think also just the conversations around Academy have elevated that thinking process a little bit because Academy falls within some of the parameters that qualifying and the benefits that we would get if we joined CRDA. So with that, I will turn it over to David to talk a little bit more about the opportunity here from Madison.
Great. Thank you very much for Selectwoman, and thank you all for the opportunity to be here. I'll give just a very brief presentation and then happy to answer any questions that folks have. As was said, I'm David Corus. I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Municipal Development Authority. We're a quasi-public authority that was set up by state legislation. The legislation actually was passed several years ago, but we didn't launch operations and we weren't funded until just about a year ago in the summer of 2024. Our purpose is to help towns and cities achieve economic development and transit-oriented development near their train stations or in their downtowns. And we do so by providing technical assistance and funding for infrastructure or gap financing directly for development. And so we have a $90 million authorization that we can use to support municipalities directly in their efforts or developers in municipalities that have projects that have been through the local land use approval process. And that brings me to, I think, a crucial point in that we can't usurp any local control by inviting us in. We don't bypass any existing local processes, either with the Board of Selectmen or the Planning Commission or the Zoning Commission. Our role is to be a tool that can help you implement your vision as you've articulated in your plan of conservation and development and through your zoning. The way that it works, it's an opt-in process. And so the first step is for the local legislative body to pass a resolution to say that you want to work with us. There's no obligation at that point. There's no commitment. It is merely an indication that there's enough local interest so that we can start spending the time and energy, rolling up our sleeves with you and figuring out whether or not one of the tools in our toolkit is appropriately mobilized to help you achieve your vision. And so I'll just spend a minute on that because the earliest a municipality could have opted in to work with us was earlier this year, February of 2025. So far, we have 22 municipalities that have taken that step in your neighborhood. Both Guilford and Old Saybrook have opted in. Clinton has taken steps towards that by holding a public hearing. And we're in, early conversations with the other shoreline communities as well. And again, at that point, there's no obligation, but it's a way for us to kind of prioritize our capacity to those communities who are interested in garnering our support. Once a municipality opts in, we then take a look at your zoning, but only in a very localized area. And so in Madison, we would be limited to areas within a half a mile of the train station and or areas that would be characterized as downtown. I think in Madison, those two overlap entirely. And so it would be a half a mile from the train station. We look to see our statutory language around zoning is to determine whether or not the zoning is likely to substantially increase the number of housing units. And I tell every community, I wouldn't be overly focused on the word substantial. If you're allowing some multifamily within the downtown, that's going to be substantial relative to your existing conditions. Likely is the really important word. Our analysis of the zoning is to determine whether or not it's calibrated so that developers can implement the vision that you've laid out, or if there's regulatory hurdles that make that unlikely. We could look at your zoning, and we haven't yet. That's not something we do before a municipality opts in, but we could look at the zoning in Madison and we could certify it. That's very plausible. Or we could have recommendations. If we have recommendations, then those go to your zoning commission. Those are vetted through the normal process, and it's up to the town whether or not to take those recommendations. If you don't take those recommendations, if we have them, then we don't move on to the next step. But if you do, then we continue the process. And again, it's totally the local prerogative whether or not you choose to do so. If we certify your zoning, either because it was already in place or we've tweaked it in collaboration, then we enter into a memorandum of agreement with the chief elected official that establishes the boundaries of the development district. And again, that is confined. It cannot be beyond a half a mile from the rail station. It cannot include zoning that we haven't certified. So my guess is there are, large portions of the half a mile radius around the rail station that would be single family zoning, and those would not be included within the development district. But the portions of the station area that include the downtown that have zoning that we've certified could be the boundaries of that district. Once the district is established, then the town can apply directly to us, or any property owner or developer therein can apply to us. And our funding can be used in one or more of four categories. They're quite broad. We can fund transit-oriented development, which is a mix of land uses within walking distance of a rail station that support ridership. We can fund housing. We can fund building demolition or rehabilitation, or we can fund development or redevelopment, which gets us to the broad infrastructure enabling language. And so it's a very flexible tool that can be tailored. I can say definitively that in those 22 municipalities that have so far opted in, they run the full range from communities without sewer to communities with sewer, from small towns to big cities, from places with rail lines and places without. And the way in which we support those communities will be as different as they are. I think it's a significant opportunity to attract some additional expertise and capacity and resources. But it's a local choice. And so, the way we engage is to start with a conversation like this to help folks understand kind of who we are and what we do, and answer any questions, and then take whatever steps that interest you all to see if this ends up being something that can help Madison.
Thank you
But
for that very,
can we?
very comprehensive overview, David. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
We'll go to board questions, and then I just have a few comments as well. So go ahead, Scott.
So, David, this sounds amazing, and thank you for coming and joining us today. I'm curious, just in listening to sort of the frame up here, what's the downside? Like, what types of pushback do you typically get from communities that say, no, we're good, we don't need this?
Yeah. Yeah. So, truthfully, I don't think that there is a downside. We're designed within the governor's vision to be a carrot to provide support to communities that are trying to build up their downtowns or their station areas in a way that's appropriate for their community. I think some people come to it with preconceived notions that to be totally honest, that by inviting in the state, somehow you're giving up something, but that's just not how our statute is written. It's very clearly written in a way that it is elective, that there are multiple off ramps if we are not aligned in what we're trying to achieve. Um, and I think beyond that, it's based on a fundamental premise that there is some level of support for growth. And again, that's not one size fits all. We don't have a density minimum. We don't have an affordability minimum. We are very much structured to figure out ways to support the type of growth that's right for a community. But listen, there are some communities that say we want nothing, and we don't want to repurpose this older building, or we don't want to develop that vacant site. And so for those communities, we wouldn't be a good tool. But for communities that have developable land, that have small businesses that they want to support with more housing within walking distance, that have vacant buildings that they're looking to repurpose, I think we can be a really valuable set of support.
Thank you.
I have a couple of clarifying questions. The half-mile radius, is that as the crow flies from, is it just simply a circle around the station? So so we've got limited access. We've just got a couple of bridges to get across.
Yeah.
So somebody could be a half-mile away as the crow flies and be a mile or more away
Yeah.
from
So
the train station.
yeah. So it's a great question. So technically, the statutory definition just says within a half a mile. And that gives us the flexibility so that we can look at the area as the crow flies, but we also do an analysis of the walk shed and the street network. And so there are many communities in Connecticut that have waterways or other barriers within that half a mile. And if there's a site that is within a half a mile as the crow flies, but is not physically connected to the station area, we wouldn't consider that. But I think the important overarching point is the boundaries, whatever they end up being, are designed in consultation with the town, right? So if the municipality says, hey, we get that this site's actually 3/4 of a mile, but it is within a half a mile as the crow flies, and it's really interesting for us to develop, okay, then we can be flexible and include that. But if the town says, hey, this site might be within a half a mile as the crow flies, but it's really nowhere near the station or the downtown, and it doesn't have any connection, we don't want to include that, then we're open to that too. It's not draw a circle and then everything in there is inevitably subject to our participation.
Yeah. One of the things I think that differentiates us from the other shoreline communities that have joined on is the station on both sides of the tracks. And that coupled with a schedule that is still below COVID levels, I have to ask the question, which comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
The state is saying, we want to see you invest in transit development, but the state isn't, for its part, developing the transit. Now, I know you're not the state, but you must have some insight into that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, and I'll answer it two different ways. So first, I work for a board which does include several department commissioners, and so the DOT commissioner is on my board. So there is a formal relationship there. The first way I would answer that is many communities throughout the state have elected to work with us because they recognize that by working together on a corridor and working with us, we can tell a more compelling story about that relationship between economic development and land use and transportation. So, for example, on the Waterbury branch of the Metro North system, which runs along the sort of Naugatuck River Valley, Derby, Seymour, Beacon Falls, Naugatuck, and Waterbury have all joined because they recognize that by demonstrating their collective potential for transit-oriented development, it makes a very compelling case for service enhancements on the rail line. So similarly, I think on the shoreline, there's an opportunity to tell that collective story about the potential and have that be justification for service enhancements. But that's not within my control. I can't commit to that. And so the second way I would answer that question is to focus on development that is reinforces and would support ridership with better rail service and could potentially drive it, but isn't dependent on it. And so really with everything we do, transit orientation is certainly a priority, but I would say walkability is an even greater priority. Making sure that these downtowns and village centers and nodes of walkable mixed use activity provide transportation alternatives that could become successful transit oriented development with commensurate rail service, but won't drive significant traffic and congestion because of the walkability, even if the rail service doesn't materialize to the level that we all would like to see.
One more question, real quick. With increased density comes increased pressure on school districts, emergency services. As part of your work with a town, do you have a rubric or a matrix to help the town assess and try to predict the impact of what density does to those services?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a deep bench of on-call consultants that are designed to answer a whole variety of different questions dependent on the community's needs and interests and the relationship between new revenue generation and service demand and the costs of those is a piece that we are absolutely prepared to help our member communities understand so that they can make appropriate decisions accordingly.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, sure thing.
Just to comment on the state has is designing, or I think it completed the design for our secondary platform. I think it was targeting construction starting in 2026. I haven't gotten an update in a while on that. Obviously, with some of the changes going on with federal funding, I don't know where that lays, but I do know right now they're testing the wetlands offset that's required because they would be taking some wetlands to expand the platform. And we've identified two areas in town that they're testing right now to see if it would qualify to be the kind of offset where we restore those wetlands. And so then they can take the other wetlands. So that process is ongoing with the recognition that, Shoreline East, has to have, Madison has to complete that piece of the puzzle in order for them to really maximize Shoreline East. Also wondering though, because we do have a bus transit hub in our downtown. There's the handoff between River Valley and CT Transit. Bus transit is also kind of part of that definition, right?
So
Although rail kind of elevates it.
Yeah, so it's not technically part of our statutory definition.
Okay.
Our hat is hung exclusively on planned or existing rail or bus rapid transit, which is very limited within the state. That would be the Hartford or the fast track line. But we certainly take that into consideration in the way that we support you, but it's not something within our statute that we that could define where we can operate.
Okay, great.
David, what is the extent of the financial or other support that you're able to provide?
Yeah, so technical assistance would be an allocation of consultant time and effort towards a discrete project scope that we identify together. Municipal infrastructure funding would be a grant with some negotiated cost share and local match. And developer support would most likely be low interest loan, gap financing, subordinate debt.
And once again, this is that's related to any developer, right?
Correct. Correct. Correct.
So it really acts as this would be that partnership, public-private partnership that we've seen other communities do.
Correct. What we typically find around the state is, between the combination of construction costs and interest rates and banks, lowering their debt to cost ratios, even with significant equity and conventional debt, there can still be a gap, and that is where we would come in with, low interest mezzanine debt directly to a developer.
And is that linked to affordability at
Not
times? Or
necessarily.
kind
So
no, okay.
no, so we don't have that statutory requirement, but it is certainly an objective, and so it'll vary on a town by town basis, right? Some cities, for example, have ample affordable housing. They can always use more, but they want some market rate. They want some, demand for ground floor retail. Other communities want to make sure that every development they do is incrementally working them towards an 830G exemption, right? So there's a lot of different local kind of reasons for different income mixes, and we can really support whatever a municipality wants. I mean, one thing I'll say, it hasn't come up, but since I mentioned 830G, I'll mention it here. A lot of communities, excuse me, have asked about our relationship to 830G projects, and what we've told them is, we only would support financially projects that have been through your local zoning approval process and are in accordance with your zoning. So we won't be a financial mechanism to make an 830G project easier. Those can still happen, obviously, within the context of that law, but our job is to help you implement your vision. And so it would be projects that are designed and approved within the context of your zoning that we would come in and make financial commitments to.
So the town is going through its process right now. We're voting on today, hiring a consultant that's going to be helping us update our zoning regulations. And so if we were to join and we got some feedback from you about what your recommendations would be, is that a two-way process, like a collaborative process, or is it this is the technical list you have to do to qualify, either take it all or you don't join?
No, it's absolutely collaborative and iterative. I think the beauty of the way our statute is written is it gives some indication of the kinds of things that we should take into consideration, but the actual certification is subjective and can be tailored. And so it is, our determination is based on that kind of back and forth of understanding where you are, understanding what the potential is, understanding what the infrastructure constraints are, and finding a solution that is right. We don't have a set series of characteristics that the zoning must include in order to be certified. And I think it dovetails really nicely with an ongoing local process, where we could be just another voice at that table, but also learn from that process where the town is headed. And I think there's a great likelihood that by kind of joining at the outset of that process, enabling us to kind of be a fly on the wall through that process, there's a high level of likelihood that a zone or zones that come out of that process would then be certified by us and lead to the establishment of a district.
Okay, great.
Could we, as a follow-up, get the statute or whatever printed informational things that you have as an organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send the web address, some kind of one pagers that we have, as well as the statutory link.
Okay, great. And I know we have, I think our chair of our affordable housing is watching this, as well as our planning and zoning chair. So, there might be an opportunity then to present to those committees as well and just talk a little bit more about this as we go through this process. The timing, I think we had met over 6 months ago, you weren't fully launched at that point, and we were also, Academy was on a certain path, right? Now, and I'm not saying that this is just because of Academy. I think that's what the town has to talk about. Academy is one piece that might benefit if we were to do this, depending on what our decisions are, either demolition or redevelopment. Even if it's demolition, it creates resources to figure that out about what you're going to do with that space. And I think it's worthy to kind of, start taking a hard look at this and seeing if we want to move forward with any kind of efforts on this part. So thank you for coming today. And I think we'll, probably follow up with some more questions, and you might have some requests from other committees to learn a little bit more about this as well. So thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. Happy to do that. And great to meet you all. And thanks for the questions.
Thanks, David.
Okay,
Nice to
great.
meet you.
Bye. You too.
All right, thank you. And we'll talk a little bit more Academy further down. I put the bike ped plan here because we have our consultants, SLR, joining us this morning. So I want to invite the team from SLR, as well as Erin is here, and the chair of our bike ped committee. And I don't know if there's a formal presentation that's. Is Erin here?
I do not see her.
Huh. Okay, and Fiona, do you guys have a formal presentation to give, kind of updating us on this?
Yes, we do. I'm also waiting for Dave Sullivan he should be in the meeting to
Sam,
join.
he's raised his hand.
Okay. And he's got the presentation, so we'll be able to share that and walk through it.
All right. And maybe, John, I know you're here. John, if you just want to spend a few minutes, I know you guys have had some public outreach, and was there a public hearing recently on this, or is that coming up?
We're having a public meeting
Public-
next Tuesday in the evening at the Senior Center. So we'll
Okay.
be presenting to the public as well and going through all the recommendations.
Yeah. And earlier this summer, we did a really fun public information session at the Scranton Library. That was like an interactive type of event where folks came in and they got to look at some of the work that's happened here in town over the years and some of the ideas we've had. And then we had a really big map of the town, and people got to stick Post-its and make comments about certain areas. So that was a large part of the information and discovery stage of this process.
Yeah, I attended that. That was
Yeah.
fun, and it was interesting just to see where people's concerns were and areas of interest of seeing improvements, and it all depends on, I guess, how you recreate in a Madison and also where you live, right? So but that was
Yeah. Yeah, it was a great event, and one of the really great things was there's a table set up for kids. So kids, like young children, under the ages of I'd say 8 or 9, they got to weigh their inputs, and they could put little coins in boxes depending on where they wanted to walk or ride their bikes. The ice cream store, the library, or the beach. And I was shocked that the ice cream store did not win. I think the library may have won, but
Huh?
it was a really great event. A lot of families turned out, and yeah, we were pleased to see that.
Okay, great. So I see we have Dave here. I'm not sure where Erin is. Maybe she was scheduled not to be here. I'm not sure, but I'm sure that SLR, we're in good hands. So with that, Dave, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have a presentation which is probably about 10 minutes. We could shorten it a little bit if you'd like, but that's maybe if we get right into it, we'll keep it under 10 minutes. I just wanted to follow up on David Corus and the CDMA. It's an amazing program. We're one of the consultants he talked about, and we're really looking forward to being part of this really amazing program. And one of the things he talked about was walkability, which I think is a great segue into this project and this presentation. So with that being said, let me share my screen and get right into our presentation. Let me get the... There we go. Could everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me get some of these things out of my way. Great. The bike walk master plan. I'm Dave Sullivan. I manage the camp team at SLR, and camp is community and mobility planning. With me today is Fiona Flynn. She's an associate in with camp, and she's an engineer by education and a planner by mentality. So she fits into these types of projects perfectly. Let me go through here, the quick project overview, and some of this I'm sure you all know about, but in 2018, the Bike and Pedestrian Committee was established, and it was tasked with creating a comprehensive bike walk master plan. Since that time, a complete streets policy was developed, several road safety audits were conducted, and education safety campaigns have taken place. Earlier this year, the town hired SLR to assist in developing a bike walk master plan, which really encompassed a lot of the good work that has been done to date. The goal is to enhance the town's facilities and infrastructure, making biking and walking safer, easier, and more accessible for everyone. The timeline of the projects, again, we started this project in March. We have had a constant outreach program that's been underway. Part of that is through our story map, which is allows for two-way communication, and it also keeps the public up to date with what's been going on. We have two meetings. The first meeting has been completed. John mentioned it. It was conducted at the end of April, and we got some very good information through that meeting. And we also conducted a community survey. Existing conditions, we reviewed a lot of the plans, including all the RSAs, the studies. We looked at the town's complete streets annual reports. And of course, we looked at the data we assembled from the public to do things like identify the existing gaps, look at the opportunities, look at the things that have been already talked about, and see how they kind of coalesce into a master plan down the road. From all that information, as it was assimilated, we came up with recommendations. It started about midway through the process in May. We've been in the process of developing a prioritized list of recommendations, which will improve the bicycle and pedestrian connections in the facilities. And ultimately, we'll finish this project up and provide the town a master plan, which will have an implementation plan with several categories to help make decisions as you go forward. The public outreach open house, again, this was done conducted in April. A couple of big takeaways that the lack of pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure and driver speeding were two of the concerns that I think permeated many of the people that attended. Some of the key locations that were discussed and as areas where better biking or pedestrian facilities would be wanted is, of course, along, no surprise here, along Route 1, along the shoreline, and the Green Hill roads in the school campus area. The community survey, we got 412 responses, which is a tremendous percentage of response for a community the size of Madison. Some of the key concerns that were identified in terms of walking, and we asked separately for walking and biking concerns, is the lack of infrastructure and distracted drivers, speeding, aggressive drivers, things like that. In terms of biking, a couple of the key concerns identified was the insufficient number of designated bike lanes, again, speeding, aggressive driving, distracted driving, and poorly maintenance was something that about a quarter of the respondents had indicated was something that they had concerns with. Another question was, where would you prioritize improvements if you had your druthers? Walking, of course, more sidewalks, dedicated paths, enhanced speed, safety and enforcement, and improvements of some of the accessibility issues such as crosswalks, curb ramps, signal appurtenances. Biking, again, dedicated bike lanes, more of those. Perhaps off-road paths. Maintenance, again, came up as an area where the bikers were looking for prioritization and enforcement measures for speeding. And then we asked, as a driver, what things would you like to see as priority improvements? Again, they would like to see the bikes in protected, dedicated areas, perhaps enforcing the traffic laws for cyclists and pedestrians so they know more particularly what to expect. Education campaigns related to number 2, of course, and additional signage indicating where the bike routes are in the pedestrian crossings. Again, some of this, these are priority locations and some priority destinations. Locations are Route 1 along the shoreline in downtown and in the school area. Destinations include the beaches, the shopping areas, town green, farmers market, and schools. So our first analytical piece of this was to determine what existing infrastructure is in place today. That includes the identifying the trails, the greenways, the transit that exists, train and bus, bicycle and pedestrian crashes, identifying hotspots where there's some history of concern, key destinations, previous studies that were done, which was a big part of the existing conditions assimilation, and what some of the previous and ongoing projects were. That was all wrapped up to develop an existing conditions or state of the system evaluation. So from here, we would be developing our recommendations, and I think I'm going to let Fiona take over here, and she's going to talk a little bit about how the sausage was made and how we got from assimilating all this information to getting a concise improvement program and a master plan with an implementation matrix to help the town go forward. So with that, Fiona, would you like to take over?
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, there was a lot of information and data and important public input that we had to distill and sort of get to a place where we could actually do something with it. So we started out with our data collection process. So again, that included evaluating those past projects and reports, of which there were many. We also conducted the survey, which we looked at, and we collected public input at our first public meeting. Then once we had an idea of what kinds of bicycle pedestrian facilities and recommendations had previously been made in other studies and what some of those priority destinations were for the public, we conducted a feasibility analysis. So the feasibility analysis was essentially looking at each of those recommendations and understanding which ones were in line with town priorities and also which ones made sense for the context. So certain facilities are more appropriate for certain roads and other facilities for other roads. We also received quite a bit of guidance and worked with the steering committee, which consisted of town staff and members of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. So they helped us to narrow down and distill these recommendations, reconcile some recommendations that were made in different reports that maybe conflicted with each other. And we also were able to find areas where there were gaps in the network that we developed from those previous studies. So then we took that analysis and that gap analysis and all of the opportunities and constraints. And we took all those recommendations that we had distilled and we conducted a prioritization analysis. So that took each of the recommendations that we had sort of filtered down and considered important factors like cost, whether that facility existed to connected to existing facilities in town, such as existing sidewalks or crosswalks, any connection to transit, which included the train station and bus stops, and then factors such as ADA accessibility, and most importantly, safety. Lastly, we have organized all of the recommendations into a project matrix. So this matrix is a tool that the town will be able to use moving forward, and it includes a list of all the recommendations and then several of those prioritization factors, such as cost, connectivity, accessibility, timeline, and essentially it lists out each of those factors keyed to each of the recommendations that we've made. So that was our process. So our toolbox, the Bike Walk Master Plan includes several types of facilities in different areas. So these facilities include things like multi-use paths. So these are also known as shared use paths or side paths, shared use trails. And these are facilities that can be used by both bicyclists and pedestrians. So these are, wider than sidewalks, for example, and can accommodate both users at the same time. For pedestrian facilities, we have several areas where we recommended sidewalks, where maybe the existing sidewalk ends or there's a desire for people to reach a certain facility. For bicyclists, this was a little tricky. There are a lot of constraints to the roadways, so our primary recommendation includes sharrows, which are pavement markings on the road, and those indicate that bikes can share the travel lane with vehicles. With sharrows, often bike signage is included as well. So this is installed, installed in order to let drivers know that cyclists are permitted to use the full travel lane. Additionally, there's areas where we're recommending that fog lines be striped in. So fog lines are that solid white line that's shown on the edge of the roadway. And what that helps to do is that you can actually visually narrow the travel lane for drivers, which helps to slow them down. And lastly, there are a couple areas where we're recommending on-road separated bike lanes as well. Next, additional recommendations include areas where we have traffic calming measures. So this includes textured pavement, which gives a little bit of feedback to drivers, and speed radar feedback signs, so that'll flash when your speed is above a certain threshold, and that helps to slow drivers down as well. And we also have several intersection recommendations. So these include pedestrian flashing beacons, which are also known as RRFBs. So you reach a mid-block crossing location, you can push the button and the lights start flashing, so drivers are aware that pedestrians or cyclists want to cross the road. There are also several locations where we're recommending high visibility crosswalks, such as the ones that are in town already. Additionally, pedestrian push buttons, which call a pedestrian signal so people can cross safely at traffic signals. And with the crosswalks, lastly, we have ADA compliant ramps with detectable warning strips. So we took all of these different types of facilities recommendations and tried to understand where in town they would make the most sense, and we mapped them in Madison. So first, we're going to go through each of the types of recommendations. So first up, we have multi-use recommendations, which again are facilities that can be used by both cyclists and pedestrians. We have several types of multi-use facilities, such as side paths. Side paths just means that the path runs parallel to the roadway. Multi-use path is could be off the road, but again is similarly wide, and then also trail extensions. So we have along Green Hill Road in the schools area, and along Boston Post Road, we have these multi-use facilities recommended. Next, these are all the locations where we're proposing additional sidewalks. Most of these connect to existing sidewalks or trails, or they're near the school. And there are several of these stretches of sidewalks are actually in the design phase and are already being pursued by the town. For bicycle recommendations, our primary recommendation, shown in the pink, includes, as I said, striping in those fog lines, which again, you can then narrow the travel lane to 10 feet as appropriate, striping in sharrows on those roadways, and adding in bicycle signage, so drivers are aware that that there are going to be cyclists using those roads. And on Route 1, there are also some stretches where we're recommending striping in sharrows on one side of the street and having a bike lane on the other side. So those are shown in green. I know I'm going through these kind of quickly, but just want to be respectful of everyone's time. Next, we have intersection improvements and traffic calming measures. So these are areas where we're recommending, for example, at an intersection, additional crosswalks or ramps, upgrades to the traffic signal and crossing, flashing beacons, and then for traffic calming, we have those speed radar feedback signs or textured pavement. And lastly, there are several roads that are particularly challenging and would really need their own dedicated study to determine what bicycle and pedestrian facilities would be appropriate. These are roads that we know that people want to use or that would help to connect town, but that really need a dedicated analysis. So these would include Neck Road, Route 1 west from downtown towards Guilford, and then Route 79 Durham Road. So putting everything together, this is essentially a very high level overview of the network that we've developed through this process. So, all the pieces separately, it's kind of difficult to see how they connect to each other, but overlapped, you can see that there are several multi-use facilities that connect to bike facilities, that connect to intersection improvements, that also have speed or traffic calming as part of them. So we're able to develop a robust bicycle and pedestrian network of recommendations that the town can then use, and from there can start to break these into projects that can be pursued as grant funding becomes available, and as prioritized by the town. So we also took all of those recommendations and we actually broke them up into maps that show a much closer look at different areas of town. So it takes all of those different types of facilities and shows a closer view of them. So this is one of the example maps. There are 4 of them. This is the shoreline map. And this shows things like areas where additional sidewalk is recommended or installation of multi-use paths, for example, near the surf club, adding in sharrows or bike lanes, areas where crosswalks or the flashing beacon should be added, etc. So there's quite a lot on here. I'm not going to go into every single recommendation, but we've again developed 4 of these maps. So there's one for downtown, there's the shoreline one, there's ones for the school area, and there's also one that shows Route 1 east of downtown as you head towards Clinton. So we've taken all this information, all these recommendations, and we've also developed an implementation plan and a matrix, which again, the town will be able to use as a tool going forward. So this matrix lists each recommendation, then factors that were dialed in with input from town staff. So that includes factors like ease of implementation, for example, timeline, or if land acquisition is required, or a high level estimated cost. It also includes factors like safety and accessibility, such as ADA compliance, and lastly, connectivity to existing bike ped facilities or to transit. And so we've taken all the recommendations and listed them out and referenced them, so that way the town can use these as projects moving forward. And yeah, that's where we're at. For next steps, we are hosting a public meeting next week. It'll be a week from today, August 19th at 6:30 p.m. at the Madison Senior Center. And we've updated the project story map with details for that. Thank you. Any questions and comments?
First question is, could you send us that presentation? This is different than the one we were provided in our meeting materials.
Sure,
Sure,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Suggestion, since a lot of the comments from the community were traffic and traffic safety related, I would recommend maybe reformatting this presentation and bringing it to the police commission to get their input on what they think is feasible and or a different perspective on how they might go to solve some of those community concerns about traffic calming and traffic patterns.
To amplify that exact point, Bruce, glad you raised it. Just in the sense of just municipalities are complex, right? And there's so many little touch points that, different organizations, commissions that need to approve things. You guys help us, Fiona or David, with navigating P&Z and the local traffic authority and police commission and board of selectmen, and just it's not a simple path to yes to getting a SCARA, which I just learned what that was. That was pretty cool. In place.
I noticed that the implementation maps were basically south of Warpus Road or just north of Warpus Road on the maps. Is that the geography that you're covering, that you're not planning on anything north of that in Madison?
It's pretty limited what was recommended. For example, like all of 79 needs to be investigated a little more closely, but based on the public input that we received and the priority areas, we zeroed in on those areas that were south of Warpus Road, for example. We wanted to make sure that we made recommendations that were actionable and specific and could be pursued, and rather than just looking at a super high level. And so that we tried to zero in on those priority areas as part of the project.
Yeah, and if I can add, there's a couple of other initiatives going on. One is a regional active transportation plan that SCROG is conducting now, and we're actually the consultant on that, which takes a more regional view of some of these things. So it's not as robust in terms of actionable items, but it does look at it on a larger scale about some of those regional things. And additionally, the state is updating their statewide active transportation plan, and they'll look at it even in a more regional context. So there's really three levels of evaluations that are going on, and I think what we felt, as Fiona says, is we needed to look at what's been studied, what's been said, what's still being said, and what's actionable that could go into the town's toolbox, so to speak. Which I'll point out another thing. Fiona showed the matrix associated with the shoreline piece, and the that will be part of the report, of course, but it will also be provided in an interactive spreadsheet. So if the town wants to look at what all the short-term opportunities are, for example, you could sort that on all the short term. If you're looking for all the low cost and easily implementable, you could sort on that. So it's kind of a live tool that hopefully is interactive enough that it could serve multiple purposes when making decisions on projects down the road.
Technical
So
question,
I know we
the-
have our,
the-
I was gonna say, I know Jack has joined us and Bruce, go ahead with your question, but I'm thinking maybe, and Rob, I think should join us about like, what is the process for other review from, town departments and then the public, because this is not the final plan, right? There's gonna be an opportunity to weigh in on this a little bit more before it's finalized.
The multi-use path that you've got the length of Green Hill. Can you give us a sense of how much of the town right-of-way that would require to put in? And I'm guessing that you would be proposing to use the town right-of-way adjacent to the road for this, right?
Yes, on a shared use path that would be adjacent to the road. So these improvements are not at the design level where I could give you a specific, it'll be 3.5 feet additional, for example. So, you would do additional design at a higher level. But in general, a multi-use path needs to be at least 8 feet wide to be able to accommodate bikes and pedestrians. Typically, they're 10 to 12 feet. And again, the right-of-way availability comes into play, certainly. And, you have the opportunity to do shared use paths on both sides, which are essentially wider sidewalks. You have the ability to do them on one side, which are a little wider, but they accommodate two-directional flow.
But they're included in the proposal. So at some level, has it been determined that it's at least feasible to put this in, that there's space there to do it?
Yes, if there's constraints, they've been identified in the matrix. So for instance, if there's a potential for private right-of-way needed, that's been identified at a high level. We haven't identified that this property here or that property there. So that's part of what the matrix gives you some indication of.
And I assume you're just relying on GIS, right? I mean, we haven't gone out and done
Yes.
surveys or anything like that. So you've done a
Absolutely.
GIS level review, right? Okay.
Correct.
And maybe if Rob, you could talk a little bit about because I know one of the hot buttons areas obviously is Green Hill, which is not a surprise. We have a separate process going on right now where they are going to the design level, right? So Rob, is this kind of feedback from this study being provided to the consultants that are taking the deeper dive into the Green Hill Road Sidewalk project?
Yeah, so I've had the opportunity to comment on this. Dave and his team, Fiona, they've done a great job. And about 2 weeks ago, we were on almost close to a 90-minute call, reviewing all these areas. And I've given my input, made them aware of the projects that are in the process of being designed, SLR being involved in a couple of them, and then also a couple of our other projects by other consultants. What's being proposed here is in line with kind of what they're doing. So there's nothing right now that's currently in design that doesn't jive with what's being proposed here or discussed here.
Okay, great. And Jack, obviously, a lot of this is important in terms of your role as the local traffic authority.
Can you hear me? Good morning, everybody.
Yeah, good morning.
David Fiona, thank you for your presentation. I've been here about 16 years and we talk about this every year, but I have to ask the question. The key to all this happening is that the state of Connecticut and Route 1 maybe make the first step possibly. Does the state of Connecticut on Route 1 have the authority and the right of way to put bike lanes? Use that as an example, east and west. I mean, could they go and do it tomorrow if they had the ability to do it?
Can they or would they?
Well, that I know the second part of that. I'm asking you though. I'm asking your expertise. Do they have the ability to put? Because the key to anything happening in this town is our roads all connect, and the ones you had, to Route 1, and that requires encroachment and various other permits. So I'm asking a question. Your expertise. This isn't about you. This is about the state. Do you believe they have the ability with the right of way to go if they were to do an east to west corridor opening? Advanced pedestrian and bicycle safety and traffic, somebody could actually ride to New Haven if they wanted to go to work. Do they have that ability? And do they have the land on a right of way to do it? Use Madison.
So we did look at this a little bit. So I'll answer it a couple ways. There are some very sensitive areas. Let's take the west side of town. So there appears to be right of way based on the GIS mapping. It's a question of how is that right of way best used? Is it used for sidewalks? Is it used for bike lanes? So there is right of way to do something through there. In terms of what they would do and what they have room to do, there is, I believe, that Scrog will be coming out shortly, or at some point in the future, potentially looking at Route 1 in terms of bike and pedestrian facilities. Now, if that would take a deeper dive in looking at what makes sense for these different sections of road. So to go from Madison to New Haven, there's going to be areas that are extremely difficult. There's a lot of bridges, for example. So, can it be done? Well, you could rebuild a bridge, but is it practical to rebuild a bridge to get an extra 5 feet so you can have bike lanes? So one of the recommendations, and maybe it slipped by, but it was looked at, I'm thinking it was done in a previous master plan, look at the bike and ped area. Fiona will correct me if I'm wrong, but in that study, they looked at a bike lane in one direction on Route 1 and Sharrows on the other direction. And the reason is that those could fit today fairly easily, but to increase that to bike lanes in both directions, you would need an additional 4 or 5 feet. Now, does 4 or 5 feet exist throughout the corridor? Probably. There's some areas where you have rock outcroppings and you have some sensitive wetlands, you have some sensitive private properties and things like that that would need to be considered if you were going to take a 5-foot swath and widen for the entire western section, for example, from downtown to Guilford. I'm not sure. Does that answer?
Well, you're correct. All right, thank you. What I focus on is downtown and everything else. People want to go and they'd like to take their bike, whether it be out to the beach, whether it be out to Hammonasset, whether they go north to the schools. Green Hill, those roads we could work out. Although Green Hill is becoming quite a very busy road. It's also a diversionary route for the state of Connecticut when I-95 shuts down. We know all this, but I've sat with different groups trying to get this going with incredible enthusiasm and dedicated people in this community that have worked hard for this, only to be discouraged and are working with the DOT. I would love to see bike lanes, and I was a biker for years. I would leave my office and go to Branford and back. But the problem is we still have to respect 3 feet on each side by law for a bicyclist. Okay, that being said, how do I get the state of Connecticut to focus on within this town of Madison what we really would like to see in a greenway / bike route, pedestrian route? Just give it to me from Hammonasset out to we'll say Neck Road. That'd make a lot of people happy in this community. We'll work on going north and south, but we need them and the engineers and the people. The problem I found with the state, and I worked for the state at one time, is that people retire. The plans that are getting ready to be approved, they go back to, they reset to zero. And we have to start the process again. The crosswalks at West Wharf, the crosswalks in other areas of town, and I've walked this with a bunch of engineers within the last 2 years for the state of Connecticut to do a safety audit. There were so many people there. Cecil B. DeMille, it was a casting call. They've been very proud of it. The point being is, we need the state. The state is the key here. They need to come and say, we're doing a master plan. We're going to do this from point A to point B. This is your opportunity for encroachment, others, to connect the rest of what you folks would like to see in your community. How do we get the state of Connecticut? Maybe they're doing it and we're just not seeing it yet, but that's always been the hindrance and that's what slows it down. And it's sad because now I could talk to generations of people that worked hard to try and get this going and done. And when we get to the state road, it's like, oh gosh.
Well, what I can do, because we've been in touch with the state on their active transportation plan, and in fact, they did a little tour of the region.
I'm
And
asking for your wisdom. I know you're just a consultant on this.
yeah, well, what I'm saying is this is the time to get it on some priority list with the state. So I think what I can do is outside of this meeting, I could reach out to you, give you the name of the consultant who's leading up the project manager for the consultant, and also who's managing it for the statewide active transportation plan. I'm sure they need to be looking at Route 1, at least from a high level, and start talking about prioritizing some of this if they're serious about finding ways to use bicycles for more than just recreation. If you're going to use it for transportation, it has to go somewhere.
So,
I appreciate that.
but in my understanding, I thought Guilford actually is taking it to the next step. So they actually are developing a plan on Route 1 to the Madison border. That was my understanding. And so we were talking about, okay, now we need our continuing plan from Guilford on. And then I thought through the through our COG, there might be an opportunity to do like a regional project on that. The thought was it might be more appealing, right? If we have like a unified project along that corridor. I will say the fact that they've been very proactive on the crosswalks now, right? By coming to us and saying, hey, we'll approve your crosswalk plans and we want to add more sidewalk, which we just got approved through LOTSIP, to expand our sidewalk project downtown along Route 1 and then up, to the town green. So that doesn't mean it's, everything's going to get done the way we want it, but at least there has been, I think, a little bit more of a sympathetic eye and towards approving some of these things that the town's submitting. But I think it would be, Jack, I think your points are important and maybe this is more effective through the COG, sitting down and talking about how do we really unlock this, and get a bunch of communities to say, let's go together with a unified plan. So that might help us make more progress on that.
Thank you.
I know there's a lot. I guess the next phase then is the public hearing, and then ideally, with some modifications and input from the different constituent groups. The goal is to have a list of projects that the town would put as, things either through LOTSIP or, through the COG or through our own capital plan to kind of list out priorities from there. And I feel like this is a good starting point, but then I think there has to be a lot of discussions amongst the boards. What are those priorities, right? Some of these are going to be very costly. Some of them are nominal though. If I looked at the dollar signs on that one slide, for example, Rob, we're going to be repaving Middle Beach in a couple weeks, right? Because of the water line that was installed. So should we be fast forwarding and looking at some of these recommendations now about the line, the lines being drawn on Middle Beach once the road is repaved? which is, we're talking months from now. So I'm just flagging some stuff like that. Like, let's try to jump on some of this to adopt it. But I guess, as a board, do we adopt this plan? I mean, I think the Bike Ped Committee, have they endorsed this at this point, John? Or are you gonna plan on doing like another round and then it would come to our board after you make a recommendation? I don't know if John is still on. Has there been any kind of like finalization process, I guess is my question at this point?
Yeah, sorry about that. I
Yep.
couldn't find the mute. It disappeared on me. Yeah, no, the board, we've gone through this in one meeting where, I know that everyone's anxious to get through all the details during the next session. But we've walked through all of these recommendations with the consultants and that steering committee that Fiona mentioned. So we have taken that and relayed it to the rest of the committee, and then we've walked through these recommendations. We haven't officially, I guess, voted or made any specific recommendation that we are in line with this, but I can say that these recommendations, we're very happy to see these. And I think that that wouldn't be something far off for us to recommend and stand next to these recommendations that were submitted here today that you all saw. So I really don't think there'd be much change. Really what we're seeing here, it all mirrors what we've seen as a committee over the last 8 years, coming from public's output. So that's great.
Okay. Okay, good, because I do think there's a couple of near-term opportunities with where we are on some of these projects, then also with the road paving, Rob, because I think East Wharf is slated for the spring. So kind of coming up with an agreed plan for those roads, since they're going to be repaved, we should take advantage of the opportunity from a time standpoint to get whatever the fog lines or whatever the recommendations are for some of those. I just looked at it quickly. But no, I think it's well done. I'm sure you'll get a lot of feedback. I think the concern from the public is going to be very specific to, well, what's the plan? This is going to impact my neighborhood. Is it going to come onto my property if they put this here? And I think the key thing here is that we're not approving a project, we're approving a plan. Individual projects will come out of this and they will be vetted more in both the public as well as along the boards. So it's not like we're saying this is all going to happen, but it's like, this is what we should be moving towards. And then the individual projects will go through their typical vetting process that we have here in town.
Yes.
Any other questions for SLR? No? We're good? Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate your time
Thank
today.
you
I look
very,
forward to seeing the final when it
And
gets
we-
finalized.
and we'll send this presentation through Aaron so that you have it, and we'll go from there. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
So the next just item on the agenda is related to, we were Academy, just following up on our previous conversations. And I think before we were calling it a RFP. And now, having kind of done some more due diligence and talking to different people, I think we wanted to define this as more of an expression of interest process that we would want to go through. And we have a kind of a loose working group. It's not a formal committee of just people who have expertise in this area, and we're getting some really good feedback. It includes staff and then some members of the public about how to structure this. So you received a draft Sunday night from me on this expression of interest. And the idea here is to just see, do we have other options for the building besides demolition? Is there realistic options? And so this was trying to be broad and also highlight, where all the information is about the condition of the building, and say that the town wants to partner with this group, to see something happen here if it's something that the community is amenable to it. So this lays out kind of on a high level basis, I would write probably a letter in front of this. I was getting some feedback from some of our members of the public that were on this call about, laying out the kind of some of the visionary things in a letter from the first selectman's office, but pretty much, and then accompany this, and then we post it. There's a timeline that we would follow and see where we land in terms of interest. So I wanted to get some of your, you're welcome, if you have wordsmithing stuff, you could email that to me. But wanted to get kind of a high level conversation right now. And Jen, you've sat in on the calls. It's a good group of people. They're not endorsing this, or we didn't vote on it. So it's not like the committee, it was all getting feedback so that we could come up something to present to the board.
My first question is a bit of a tangent, which is where are we with the quotes for demolition, which was a project we were going to be working on in parallel to this.
So my understanding, it's the work that's being done for Ryerson, which is actively, we had hired actually a consultant to do this. That is ongoing now. We're going to hopefully September, October, getting a pricing on that. And Ben's view was that will basically give us the detail that would allow us to price out Academy. So rather than hiring somebody else to go in and give an estimate and duplicate costs, he thinks that what we will get from Ryerson will give us enough to give us a very good idea of what the demolition cost will be for Academy. So we're looking to have that. We will have that number at the same time that we will be getting these things back. We've been doing kind of high level talking about $3-4 million kind of conceptually. Ryerson, I guess, in his view, it will be very easy to extrapolate from that analysis what would it would mean for Academy for the cost. Otherwise, we'd have to go and hire and spend, I think it was $40,000 was the cost, because the Neck River Committee hired a consultant, which I'm forgetting the name of, to go and do that analysis.
Well, since Academy has been a 21-year history of unpleasant surprises, I'm wondering if that wouldn't be money well spent to come up with a firm number. I'm a little concerned about extrapolating the Ryerson number to Academy, and then getting into a demolition path and finding out that it's materially different.
I think it's a worthy conversation. I had extensive conversations with him about this in last month. But let's at our next meeting talk about that. If we want to allocate funding, we certainly have money for Academy that we can allocate for that, and procure somebody to do it. He seemed to think very strongly that it was wasted funds in his mind. I don't know a lot about this whole, how you come up with demolition analysis, but happy to have him come and explain that, and we can vote on procuring somebody more formally if we need to. And then he can also give an update on the Ryerson number as well. Scott, you're cutting out a lot.
Can you hear me now?
Now, yeah. Your mic is really kind of not great though.
Okay, sorry. I thought he had attended one of our previous meetings. Explain that to us already.
He did. He talked about it when we talked about this, and it was in June, I think. But we were doing an update anyway on Ryerson, and I think the whole Neck River team is coming to our next meeting. So I think we'll tag that on and talk about, do we actually want to take the step of hiring somebody? I'll let him speak to that. Because it was his recommendation as construction manager not to do that until we got the Ryerson estimate back. So we'll talk about that on our next board meetings, I think, is in 2 weeks.
Well, with the caveat that I don't support this RFP and haven't supported it from the start, my input is that the work that was done in 2016, 17, and 18, culminating with the Great Blue Survey, which really became the foundation for the community center, right? It was the response to that survey that became the foundational reasoning for moving forward with a community center in the first place. In that data, what we saw was a very, I won't say sentiment against development of that property as housing, but certainly it was among the lowest of what the community wanted to see. And certainly the community was dead set against anything that looked like selling the property. And I'm worried that this RFP is now ignoring that community input and actively soliciting residential development for the property. And I don't know how residential development would work without the sale of the footprint and some of the adjacent fields. So that's my input, is that I think that we ignore the community and the community sentiment at our own peril. So
We make the same argument that community input, at least when Academy was voted for, was strong to retain that property, to leverage that property, to turn it into a community center. It was passed into 15.9 million. So I think you could make arguments on both sides of that, Bruce, that there was plenty of community input for doing something with that property as well.
well, it was with the constraints that it not be torn down at the time, right?
Yeah.
So the Great Blue didn't offer up a demolition option because we felt that that was a constraint we needed to put on the questions. But the community center was born out of we sort of cobbled together these community activity based responses and bundled them up into a community center, which, according to the data, made sense. It looked like a strong expressed preference. We've just discovered that there's a value calculation that goes along with that, and it's not 24 million. I think, I've made my thoughts pretty clear on this. I'm just trying to give some constructive input on directionally going towards housing. I think will be problematic moving forward.
I think we all recognize, I think the times have changed. Times have changed since 2022 and times have changed since 2017. So I think we're in a new period of time. And, that's where I think we owe this last, effort, because we're in a very different housing market than we were back in 2017. I mean, look what's been developed since 2017 downtown. The Bradley, right? Which is multifamily. The General's Residence project, right? Which is a cluster housing development right downtown. So there's been some changes, I think, in terms of like acceptability about what we're seeing in our downtown area. I think I just watched today, housing is at its peak again. It's starting to show a little bit of a slowdown, but housing demand is still incredibly high and there's very little inventory. We have like record low inventory in Madison. So the demand for housing has risen substantially since 2017 as well. This doesn't say it has to be housing. It just says that housing is clearly an option that would be considered. In our conversations as a working group, it's ranged from, makerspace, which we've seen other towns do, some sort of economic development kind of hub, makerspace, to live workspace for artists. Those are other developments that exist in Connecticut that have converted old schools where you have, so it's more subsidized housing for artists with, a creative, cultural aspect to it. You could, or just regular housing or affordable housing. So there's been the gamut of what the opportunity could be. And then there's the Cultural Arts Center. There's still people out there that feel that this is the community center was going to kind of address some of the cultural arts, but it was going to be on the back of the Madison taxpayer, right? So the idea here is, can you get a cultural arts center going that's not going to be funded by the town and have an ongoing carrying cost by the town? And I think the referendum, whatever the takeaway was, it was the cost of the project, which really wasn't different because we were using grants for the additional amount of money, but it was that carrying cost too, because you put $500,000 operating costs, right? And then you put another $500,000 roughly of interest expense for the additional debt that was going to be taken on to finish it. And I think that was also off-putting. It was like, okay, now our budget has to absorb even more. So the whole theme was, more taxes, right? So you had these carrying costs that were going to be embedded in your tax base going forward with the revenue being, I think, a real possibility, but it was, speculative and is not guaranteed. So if we find opportunities where the town isn't carrying the costs, and we have potential for tax revenue, I think there would be more of an acceptance from the townspeople. The advice we've gotten from these people on the working group has also been that you can do long-term land lease agreements. You don't have to sell the property. You don't have to include the ball fields, but that obviously makes it more attractive. So, I mean, I know we've had so many conversations about this, but the idea here is let's see what the market comes back with, and see if there's other viable alternatives that will address the public's concerns about the carrying cost of the building. So I don't know, other thoughts. This would give us, the timeline here would basically be, we would be issuing this in a couple weeks. And then we would get final proposals. Why am I missing? My printout skipped a couple boxes here. So they would be due in mid-October. The Board of Selectmen would have a special meeting to go through what those proposals are and decide if we feel it's worth pursuing one or multiple paths. And then in November, we would spend time vetting those options, and then picking a path. That doesn't mean we're committing to a project, but we're saying, what if we got like 10 different housing proposals and we're like, wow, this is a real opportunity for us. This is actually a viable thing for housing. And we decide to go down that direction. Then we figure out how do we narrow that down and feel confident that the project can be successful. One of the things that came up in our discussions, and Jen can recall this, is risk, right? What's the assurance somebody puts in an idea, but then you can actually execute on that idea? And I think our job is going to have to be the due diligence to ensure that if we're going to go down a path again, that we can actually, it's feasible. One of the reasons it was good to have David Corus come and talk to us is that, there's also this other portfolio of resources now for development because this happens to fall within that TOD area. So that pool of resources, whether it's the town vetting projects, to ensure it's what we want, we could tap into that and get funding for that. And developers can tap into and get attractive financing to move this project forward. So that's something that didn't exist also back in 2017. But we would have to obviously qualify and be certified, I guess, through CRDA in order to tap those resources. So that's a process that we would have to talk about, and you'd have to have a public hearing, and then it's a vote of the legislative body to do that, to join CRDA. So, Jen, I mean, you've been on the calls, I think it's been robust conversations.
Yeah, there's been, folks in the calls that have expressed positives and negatives to going through this process. I think the important thing to remember too is that whatever, if we receive any interest back, it doesn't mean that as a town we're under any obligation to move forward with any of the proposals. It's, if there is a proposal or multiple proposals that were to come forward that we found to be interesting, then we could enter into further discussions, but we're not obligated to if we don't think the right thing comes up. And ultimately, it's been discussed that if we do think there's a viable option, it's still going to have to go back to the townspeople anyway, for their input and their vote on if it's a path that we go down. One thing I will say though, and I forget if it was Vance or David that brought it up, um, making it a requirement for the interested parties to attend the pre-proposal conference as opposed to just highly encouraging them, but requiring it so that they actually come and walk through the building and see what it is that they have to work with. Because right now in the document, I did notice it still says highly encouraged. So I think, with the twists and turns that we have encountered throughout this process, I think we should make it a requirement for folks to attend if they want to submit a proposal.
I tried to read through the proposal as best I could. I did not do a line by line. Does the proposal include a requirement that the submitter demonstrates the financial resources to follow through on what their interest is? And if not, it should be.
So they're supposed to talk about how they would finance this and all that, but we're not looking for that level of commitment yet, because I think that this is a little bit of a chicken and egg discussion. We talked about this on our meetings, right? Because normally the town would say, this is what we want, right? If you're doing an RFP, you're saying, this is exactly what we want from this. And then people are going to have to spend time and money to have a real shot at winning the proposal, right? And so we're being very open-ended. So if you're a developer, how much money are you really going to spend up front on something when there's not specific, it's a risk on their part too. And I think what we're trying to get out of this is just interest and then explaining how they would pay for it rather than like all these, originally this was written like an RFP and it had all that. It had like strict conditions. I think if then what comes out of this is like housing is the winner or this other concept is the winner, then the next step would be you need to demonstrate how you pay for this and do you have the wherewithal to pay for it? I think that would be the next step.
So picking up on the open-ended idea of this, I'm going to ask the question quite bluntly. When is this all over? When are we done with this conversation and actually prepared to do something? I think this board should make a commitment that on a date or no later, we are going to stop fact-finding and we're going to start to move forward.
Well, if I recall correctly, a few meetings back, we had said that by the end of this calendar year, we were going to, that's what our deadline was going to be.
And that's when we'll also know how much it's going to cost. Because remember, some of this is cost avoidance, right? So I'm not rushing to write a $4 million check to tear down a building. And then it's going to cost whatever we want to do with it. Even if it's just, if it's just green space, fine. But if it's going to be this amphitheater concept or this, that's all going to cost money too. So, I think the goal is to say there's a viable option to repurpose this building, and we could be very excited about that. And I think then we would say, okay, we're not going to go down the demolition route. We're going to try to take this to the next level and pursue this option. Or we get no interest or nothing back. People think it's just going to be too expensive or too complicated to try to repurpose the building.
Not even just cost avoidance, but revenue generating.
Yeah, revenue generating, exactly. And once again, this is something that's in the heart of our town. It's in the TOD area. It's, all about vibrancy. And that was what the point of the community center was, is drawing people to our downtown, having the building be a living, breathing building and being used, but also preserving a historic building that's part of our town history.
The Academy building is a significant asset, both financially and emotionally. And I think as Jen has stated, there's no reason not to go through this process. I think the public expects us to come forward with what we think is the best option, including value. And without going through this process, I think we will discover if there are any other viable options. So I'm still in favor of moving forward with this expression of interest process.
Creative name, boy. Very creative. Expression of interest. All right.
Yeah. Which I guess is somewhat common. And there was another example, like Naugatuck is going through this. They have a series, Aaron had sent us an example of that. They have a couple of old mill sites along the river, and they put out this very broad, like we want to hear the ideas of what's possible, and feasible. And, then the town can then determine the direction to go with those properties. So, I mean, historically, the town, I think, we had all these different committees, and I think there was just always a wrestling of what, which one was going to make it to the finish line, right? And I think this is going to be the same. We're going to be, unfortunately, be kind of reliving that a little bit with this. But I think considering the referendum, we know that people's sentiments change. Because, 2022, this was strongly endorsed, the community center and the budget. And I think times have changed and people looked at it a little differently and voted a different way back in May. So, and I think housing, we're in a very different situation with housing than we were back in 2017. So, so I think the thinking here is then, and Jen, just on your point about the I didn't put mandatory. I wanted to consult with Ben a little bit more about that because I was also looking at the dates. If we're going to do that, do we offer, also how many, I wanted to talk to him a little bit more. How many people can we take through that building? We got to, so I'm comfortable putting mandatory in there. I just want to have that conversation with him. Do we
Sure.
have multiple dates of small groups, limited number of people,
Yep.
but I think to the point that came out of the discussion was, some of the feedback we've gotten, we did have a small group go through it recently. It's People are saying it's actually not, I think there was the building's in horrible condition and it should just be condemned. That was the narrative that was out there in the public, but the reality is very different. You can repurpose this. People do it all the time in the state of Connecticut. We have a lot of old buildings and we have a lot of old schools. And, this building, the feedback we got on this recent walkthrough, it was not as bad a condition as people were expecting, considering the fact that it had not had any utilities or anything servicing it for quite a period of time. So, and it has no different environmental issues than any old school building, including Ryerson and including Jeffrey. So, there's this narrative that somehow this building is worse off than anything ever in the state of Connecticut, when the reality is it's not. It's kind of in line with what other buildings in, older school buildings and older buildings in general have in the state. It's an old building and there's going to be problems with it. So I think then if the board is good roughly with this timetable, I'd just like to work a little bit. You can send specific feedback on the language in here. And then I think we just get this launched. I might push the timetable out by another week just to because we've had some vacations and I want to get specific feedback from people. And then we just get this published. I think right now we're showing it as, what did I put in here? The published date on this was, so it gets submitted by the 15th, but I think we were going to publish it on the 18th. I might push that out a little week, push some things out a little bit, but other than that, we'll just move forward and make this happen.
If I might be just permitted a closing comment, realizing I'm not swaying anybody here. I think that if we think about the ideal of the active community space and the community center being sort of the best expression of that, a town community green is at least the dotted line connection to that ideal. And any other use is going to be, I think, a fundamental move away from that. Certainly residential property takes it off the table as a community gathering space. So with that said, I will be quiet.
Okay, great. Any other comments? No, and like I
Let's
said,
just make this happen. Let's get something
Okay.
done here.
and see where we land, right? So
Yeah, I mean, to me, the world is our oyster right now, so it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, good. Well, thanks for that. And we will get this out and I'll update you on the final and then we'll get this process moving. Moving on to item number 10, discuss and take action to accept a recommendation from the Beach and Rec Department to award a contract to 10 Cape New England LLC in the amount of $448,000 for the Green Hills Softball Field Turf Replacement Project and to authorize the first selectman to sign all documents associated with this award. Budgeted in the fiscal year 2025-26 CIP.
Moved.
Second.
Okay, this is just the contract we did the town meeting, so the funding is all there. This is so I don't know if there's any further discussion. This is just awarding the contract.
Just a request. I mean, I support this. I think we're committed to doing this, but I think given the ever increasing costs of these fields, it would be good for us to have a real cost benefit analysis between turf and natural grass. We've got a good example. We've got at the town campus, we've got a terrific baseball field. So we know what it costs to maintain a natural surface athletic field. And I think that as we are going to be coming up on these decisions in the future, it would be good to have those hard numbers.
I agree.
So-
Especially,
I agree with you, Bruce. I think it's great. It's not unique now. My guess is there's something out there that probably we can point to already that helps us and informs us about comparisons, because every town is experiencing.
So one of the things that we're hoping to add to the Surf Club master plan, and we talked about this with the consultant that we hired, was to do an overall townwide field assessment. Precisely to talk about that, because there's obviously a big debate right now about synthetic versus natural turf, the cost, the health and safety issues associated with both. We're also going to be facing strong field, which is going to be a significant replacement cost for that. And so when I spoke to Austin a couple weeks ago, the idea was we could add a piece of that Surf Club plan is they can go out and do a look at all, like an inventory and assessment of all our fields and give us some insight into that. So I do think it's an important conversation for us to have. Surf Club is a little unique because you're also in a flood zone. So like what is the most appropriate for that area as well? But I think to your point, there's, the trend was for a long time to go to the artificial turf, and now people are maybe rethinking that because of some of the health concerns and also the cost for that. So we will be talking about that again more in the future. So with that, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And this one obviously is already artificial turf, so we're just kind of replacing, it's becoming more of a safety issue, and it's important that we do that. Okay, item number 11, discuss and take action to accept a recommendation from Planning and Zoning Commission and Land Use staff to award a contract to Tyke Planning and Policy Group in an amount not to exceed $85,000 to assist the Planning and Zoning Commission in the comprehensive review and update of the zoning and subdivision regulation to authorize the first selectman to sign all documents associated with this award, budget and CIP.
so moved.
Okay, so this is just the group that they are retaining to assist in that zoning regulation update. So any further questions on that? We've worked with Tyke before. They did our plan of conservation development. And also our affordable housing plan. So I think there was a benefit to seeing somebody who's so embedded in a lot of the other planning documents with the town, maybe to keep them working with us on the zoning piece.
So I understand the need for outside consultants on the PCD. That was really an enormous project. I'm just going to ask the question: why does the Planning and Zoning Commission need outside resources for this? Do we not have the ability internally to evaluate our planning and zoning and update them as we think appropriate?
So I know Erin's on vacation this week, but my understanding, and we've been planning for this, this was in the CIP. that this is quite an extensive process and also very technical and legal. So I think to have an expert come in and assist us in this process was critical to do that. That's my understanding, and this was something that had been planned for. Jen, I know you're the liaison. Was there any question not to hire somebody, or?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Too.
Yeah, you're still, Mike is not great, Scott.
I'll tell you. Carol is on the call if we need her.
Oh, yeah. Okay, maybe we'll have Carol step up. Carol, if I know sometimes people are on these calls but if you can hear us, we welcome you to weigh in on this.
Muted. There we go.
Oh, great. We can hear you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for pulling me into the conversation. Yeah, it's a lot of legal and very technical updating and revisioning that needs to be done. I don't know if revisioning is a verb, but there you go. And, first of all, we need to just vastly clean up a whole history of decades of amendments and special exceptions and make it clear what our processes are and try to make them more streamlined to facilitate easier, faster applications and development. And if we make any text changes, that will have to go substantial text changes that will have to go before our legal counsel. But by having consultants assisting us, they've seen similar zoning regulation updates in many other communities. So, and they're very thoroughly familiar with state statutes and changes in the laws that have happened since we've last revised our zoning regulations. So does that help, Scott, Bruce, answer your question?
Yeah. Thanks, Carol, for that. As far as policy direction, that is still going to stay with planning and zoning, right? We're not going to be relying on an outside resource to.
Exactly. Yeah. And also we're still waiting to see what happens at the state level in the fall, since the big housing bill was vetoed by the governor. And that will have an impact on us too.
And once again, this has been budgeted for, so it's not a special request. It's been planned and budgeted for in CIP. Okay.
Thank
All right.
you.
Well, thank you, Carol. Appreciate that. So, all in favor of approving item number 11, say aye.
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 Okay. All right, great. So we'll move that forward. Next item is discuss town policy and procedures regarding contributions to nonprofit organizations. So I wanted to have just a conversation as we kind of in advance of the budget season. We have had kind of a history of selective donations to different groups. And it's always been kind of, I think, it was just this line item in the selectmen's budget. And, I've kind of carried forward the history of that without necessarily questioning it or, there's no like policy direction around it. And I think you were submitted a summary of what the kind of history of those donations are. There's usually, but obviously we're entering a time now too, where, some of the funding for nonprofits is being squeezed very heavily. But I feel like we should have some sort of policy. I think a lot of this was just inherited. I've not really made any adjustments. Obviously, our largest donation goes to Friends of Madison Youth, which is the Arts Barn group. And I know there's kind of a history behind that, the list you have goes back to 2015. There's a whole history of the Arts Barn and the organization. They use the building over in the Arts Barn building here. So they get a donation every year from the town that's been consistent. And then they also have use of the Arts Barn space. Madison Cultural Arts, that's the concert on the green. I know the town funding has been historically been very important to them. That is an event that benefits the community and benefits our businesses. the American Legion, we give this money every year, is really just paying for flags on the graves. So that's what that number is. It's kind of to fund that so the town actually pays during Memorial Day when they go out and put flags on the graves, the town actually funds that. So that's what that is. And then there's these other groups that have been kind of literacy volunteers, Shoreline Soup Kitchen, those are ones that are still kind of in there. It's nominal amounts of money, but I'm kind of like sitting there going like, we should think as a board, what our policy is for this, what nonprofits we're supporting. And then, because there's also a lot of nonprofits we don't support that are in Madison. And then how do we manage that? But like, what's our budget for that? And then how do we manage that going forward? So I did actually, this last year, I had calls with a number of these groups just to understand a little bit what their mission, how do they impact Madison. But wanted to just get some thoughts moving forward about, how we want to handle this through the budgeting process. Because, it's not a big number. Once again, the biggest number obviously is Friends of Madison Youth. That's the largest contribution that we give to a nonprofit. The other ones are much smaller. And just your board thoughts, not deciding on anything today, but maybe going forward as a budgeting process, we develop a policy and, maybe we have a group, maybe it's through our social service department, maybe they make recommendations of where should we be making donations to nonprofit groups with taxpayer dollars, right? I kind of step back and say, why is the town doing this? Because it's picking and choosing winners and losers, right, of different organizations, of who gets public funding versus people who have to go out and get private funding. So that's what the agenda item is here. And I guess I open up to your thoughts.
Just a quick question with the Friends of Madison. So that's the Arts Barn. Is that dollar amount actual cash that we give them, or is it they're allowed to use the space, and that's what the rental would be on a yearly basis?
That is just a cash that they get. And then we right now have a very loose MOU with them that we just have been renewing every year. And I think that we're going to have to start having conversations about a long-term type of arrangement with them. Right now, they do not pay anything for, any maintenance, utilities. It's all handled by the town. So, and they get this donation. And I think, the history of that, and I maybe Scott or Al can speak more of that, was more, it was a group trying to, they serve a very specific population in the group with programming that wasn't being met before. So they're a valuable, service provider, I guess. They do a lot of the theater productions, and then they have great summer camps, and it's just a little different than what the town offers through our programming. And it was also trying to make use of that site that was inactive, right? And they brought it to life and run a lot of programs for there. But it's also evolved over time into a much larger, I think they've been very successful. So to their credit, they've turned it into a really successful, I think, nonprofit group that offers a lot of good programs. So I do think we have to figure out, as we go through this facilities review process, best use of our town facilities, right? And right now that's being used by this group. And certainly that should be part of the conversation about what's the best use for that building up there. And the facilities committee has started that conversation. They want to know what their future is, right? They want to know where they're going to be able to kind of plan to be for a period of time. So they would like a longer term arrangement with the town. So I think we'll need to start having those conversations as a board over the next year to figure that out. And then also the question is, do we as a town also give this, if we come up with a policy around donations, do we want to continue making those types of contributions to them?
We have an ethics that has really not been leveraged all that much. Would this be something that our ethics committee takes on in terms of just whether we should or should not be doing it?
I mean, yeah, I don't know if there's any ethical dilemma because I think a lot of communities do this. I guess I think this was dating back many years ago, probably something that was like a pet thing out of the selectman's office, right? Like, okay, yeah, you get a group come in and advocate, and then there was a little pool of money to help these groups. It's just kind of stayed that way. And now I think it's more philosophically, we set the policy. Like, what do we want to do with this?
Sure.
Um,
So, I mean, I think if I read between the lines, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, Peggy, but I'll speak for myself. I'd like to think that there's room in the town government to be able to do some of this. But I also believe that what we do should be defensible, and based in some sort of rationed thought. And I think, Peggy, that's where you're trying to take this.
mhm.
So I think that's a great I think that's a great move.
Fair to all, I think the important policy groups will help us get there.
Right.
Yeah.
And then to pick up on Jen's thought about, the non-monetary support, I do think that should be considered. And to be fair, we would want to expand it to the other nonprofits that are enjoying town space at little to no cost, right? We've got the Charlotte Everetts in Memorial Town Hall. The Historic Society is a bit of an oddball, but they're certainly enjoying town support as well. And so I'm not proposing necessarily that anything change, just that it be cataloged.
Yeah, I agree, because really what Friends of Madison is receiving then is far greater than that 18,520, if you take into consideration the space usage that they're not paying for and the maintenance that they're not paying for. They're receiving far more than what they're receiving, just in a cash donation.
Right.
Jen, I think you've identified the fact that the Friends of Madison is really the oddball on this list. And it probably goes back 25 years. I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole on this, but our predecessor boards more than 2 decades ago liked the idea of the programming that the Friends of Madison was going to offer, but didn't want it to become an element of town government. And so this arm's length arrangement was developed in which the selectmen encouraged the activity, but didn't bring it under the umbrella of town government.
And I think it is evolved, in terms of what their program offerings are and summer camps and, to their credit, they've turned it into a really wonderful thing for the town. And my kids have attended their programs. I'm sure some of your kids have attended their programs. But it is like an oddball thing on the list, because it's kind of, they're getting 2 benefits, the donation as well as the facility use. And then to Bruce, to your point, there is a list of, and we have that, I actually thought that was going to be in here. I think we talked about adding the people that are getting free space, so to speak, right? The chamber, the Charlotte Everts, the land trust actually has space in Memorial Town Hall. That's all going to be part of the conversation as we go through the facilities process and review for best use for facilities. And then I think we as a board have to determine, what terms we're going to go forward with to allow these groups to use space. Doesn't mean we necessarily have to charge them rent, but I think we just need a formal arrangement that documents, what that arrangement is. And to make sure that we're, once again, I hate to use the word winners and losers, but who gets that benefit versus others. I've had other groups reach out to me asking for donations, and I've just kind of, my response has been, we don't typically do that. We're down to a small group now, but I think we need to think about that. And so and I guess I wanted to hear back. It sounds like there's support for some sort of policy. And then the question is, do we want that to be something that falls under the selectmen's budget, or would we rather have like, youth and family and senior services kind of come up with what they feel is a recommendation, or a separate little group that makes that recommendation to us every year for the budget?
My preference would be that it stays with the Board of Selectmen, because the scope of charitable organizations could be, bigger than what Youth and Family Services thinks about. And I would propose as a starting point, Peggy, that we look to other communities, similar communities, and see if there isn't an opportunity to plagiarize shamelessly.
Yeah. Okay. All right, good. So we'll do some more homework on this and then that will give us some structure to it going forward and just formalize it a little bit more. And to your point, more transparency, because I think it's just been kind of this weird line in the budget and it'll at least put some structure to it going forward. And that doesn't mean any of these groups that you're losing your funding. So I don't want them to run off thinking they're losing their funding, but I think it just means there's going to be more of a further conversation about how we decide to do this every year. And then I think the town space argument is going to be a bigger conversation as part of facilities. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we talk about regionalization opportunities. So I'll bring that up when we talk about item number 16 also. Because we've already seen it with probate court, that was a regionalization step. The town actually is allocating space for the probate court, and then we'll talk about some other options going forward. So, okay, good. So we'll move on, if that's good, to item number 13. Item number 13 is discuss and take action to adopt a resolution authorizing the town of Madison to accept a DECD Urban Act grant for $500,000 for the emergency generator project.
So moved.
Okay, so this was just something that the state was requiring. We've already formally accepted the grant. We voted the funding. I mean, the project's underway, but they just needed this resolution to be approved. It was a specific resolution. So nothing new here. The boards have already approved the project. So, okay, any other questions on this? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. Item number 14, discuss and take action to approve a return of $79,900 from CIP residual project balances to the master account in the CNRE fund, pending Board of Finance approval.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any further questions on that? I don't have this in front of me. I think this is just cleaning up different projects where there were some balances.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. We can always have Stacy come up if there's some additional questions. Everybody good? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 All right. And then item number 15, discuss and take action to accept a donation from Madison Hose Company number 1 in the amount of $200,000 for the Emergency Operations Center Firehouse Expansion Project pending Board of Finance approval.
So moved.
Moved.
Second.
Great. So this is obviously what we had talked about in June as we move forward with the project. This is just formally accepting the donation. And I think finance department felt it was important just to get it on record as we go through the project is moving forward. We're starting to spend fund. They wanted to have the fully secured the extra $200,000 because we're awarding contracts and things like that. I don't know if there's anybody here from Madison Hose. We're obviously very grateful for their continued partnership in the project, and they gave a presentation to us about this. And we appreciate them stepping up and helping with the funding for the project, for the EOC project. Any further questions from board members? No? All right, all in favor with gratitude, say aye.
Aye.
Great. All right. Well, thank you. And we're excited that this project is moving forward. And, this was just kind of a check the box thing to ensure that we had on record of us accepting the donation. So we will move on to item number 16, which is this discussion of regionalization opportunities. And I was going to invite Chief Drum, Sam DeBurra, I think is on, as well as Ed Dowling, who's the chair of the Police Commission. So I think over the years, there's been a lot of conversations about our dispatch services, and I know the police commission and the police chief have off and on again had conversations about is there ability to like regionalize this type of service. And I think there's always been kind of, there's different hurdles that have prevented that conversation from moving forward. And I think we're doing a little bit of a reset now. And when we talk about regionalization, for example, the entire state of Vermont has one dispatch service to serve the entire state. The state has really been pushing for us to share more resources across town lines. And other communities now have moved forward to regionalize. And part of that is it's a very expensive, investment that you're making in terms of your communications function and equipment and infrastructure and towers and all this other stuff. So it's a big capital investment that towns are being asked to make to continue to support it. And now with where technology is, there's an efficiency element too, by trying to, spread that over a broader geographic area. And so I think I started having these conversations with our COG, our South Central Regional Council of Government. There's other towns that are open to talking about trying to, share these resources across multiple towns now. And the COG is actually going to undertake a study of doing this. Other COGs have done it. And we're a little unique because we're kind of on the tail end of our COG geographically. And we're also in the past had talked about, potentially regionalizing and sharing with Clinton, or Valley Shore, which is another regional entity that serves a lot of smaller towns. And so I think I wanted to talk about this, that we're going to be exploring all of this. We're going to kind of move forward and let the COG do its work in looking at this. And then also maybe entertain some conversations with partners that aren't in our council, our region, and see if that might make more sense. And then part of that conversation is also like, are we the consolidatee or the consolidator, right? Are we leading this or are we kind of joining some other group? And so that's going to be part of the conversation as well. And that's where the kind of facilities is important because we do have, the space up where the Arts Barn is could be a possible location for consolidating other towns within a regional dispatch center. And the benefit of doing that is the state would actually fund all the improvements to that facility. So the town would have, Arts Barn obviously has a lot of capital needs over the next 10 years. And so the conversations were, would we be the consolidator and the state would actually upgrade the facility and then several towns would join a dispatch center here in Madison. So that's also something that's been talked about. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk a little bit about today, make you aware that, and I think there has been in the past some support for the board looking at this, that we're going to kind of start exploring all of this in more depth. And I don't know, Chief, if you want to talk a little bit more about it. We've talked to the fire service chiefs. They're all aware of this. I think that we're in a place now where people, are open to this type of discussion. I think the technology is there now. So there's more comfort to doing this type of regionalization approach. But so if Chief, if you want to speak to it a little bit more about your thinking on this, and I know Ed has joined us as well.
There's always been a challenge to there's about 107, 110, I think, now, PSAP centers, 911. They're the point of a 911 call when you dial it is the answering point throughout the state of Connecticut. The state pays for a good portion of the upgrade, the hardware currently. So, in the lines they use coming into the emergency lines, it's an expense for the state. So the state of Connecticut is looking for ways, at least probably the last 20 years, to consolidate these. They have consolidated some of them. The regional ones that support mostly OEMS and fire services, there's approximately 5 regions that handle that within the state currently. And those are multiple towns, Valley Shore being 13 or 14 towns currently, maybe 17, including the small boroughs. With police departments, there's 9 police departments that have multiple departments that they dispatch for. Example, Stonington, Groton has Groton Long Point, Groton City, Groton Town, and North Stonington they dispatch for. Ledger does it with Preston. Fairfield has started it in the last couple of years with the town of Westport. I mean, more modern, more highly concentrated population. If we consolidated with the 911 center, then the state is kind of all in as to how they pay. They contribute to both communities. They contribute to 40% of the labor. They contribute to any upfit to the facility. And if you're on the state backbone, they pay that. Good example is we started on the state backbone. We had to take on the hardware expense as a single 911 center. That started a few years ago at about 20 grand. Now it's 120. So there are savings there. To give you an example, it's worth the having a discussion. For us, I mean, I could sit there and you could say, Jack, what is it you're looking for? I look for our neighbors only because I work with them. You know, Old Saybrook, we've discussed it with. Westbrook, we discussed it with. Even Durham discussed it with. Killingworth, Clinton, Guilford, I haven't really had an in-depth discussion, but I know that the possibility exists there. So I just think it's worth us taking a swipe at it, looking at it, doing some research, see where CROG comes out with. I know they've had other studies in various other communities. A real big, robust one is in Litchfield Hills, with a lot of the resident trooper towns. So I just ask that let's take a look at it. If it works, something we should pursue. If not, we'll move on. Thank you.
Ed, I know you have your hand raised. I know this has been a topic at the police commission for quite a while, even back
Yes.
when I was on the police commission. So,
Yeah. I don't know. Can you hear me?
yes.
Am I on? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I will be brief. If there was a Board of Selectmen historian, it would be noted that on August the 13th, 2018, the chief and I made this presentation to consider this subject on behalf of the Board of Police Commission. To be clear, the recommendation at that time was not to move to regionalization. It was to put together a informed group of all first responders, including the fire chiefs, EMS, emergency personnel, to evaluate the concept of partnering with a neighboring community and then come back to the appropriate approval aid organization such as the Board of Selectmen with a recommendation. That was what we were advocating and urging at that time. And over multiple first selectmen administrations, it was at least allow us to explore this. And we ran into just the normal challenges of trying to advance a new idea. And that was, this is a good idea, but now's not the time. Then we heard, we tried it before and it didn't work. And then we heard, well, wait, it's the budget season, it's the election season, it's the holiday season, it's the summer vacation season. So there never seemed to be a convenient time to at least evaluate this concept. The idea of a study being initiated by the South Central Council of Government, I think makes sense. On the other hand, as I'm sure Peggy and everyone is well aware, this is a group of 15 different communities of varying geographic size, population density, road networks, cultural priorities, and the challenge of trying to come up with some common concepts and ideas in a timely way is going to be, I think, very, very challenging. It is not natural for, I think, Madison town functions or departments to have some discussion to advance a new idea and say to themselves, how does Bethany do it? Or how does Woodbridge do it? It just does not seem to fit what the chief has mentioned, and that is, what are the relevant communities that experience some of the similar population surges, road densities, road patterns that we in Madison do to consider this type of service. So my strong recommendation, and we have discussed this extensively at the Board of Police Commissions, is not to make this an either or discussion in terms of whether it's the SCOG or some other our adjacent communities. Let the SCOG study move forward at whatever time and pace it determines. On the other hand, if there are communities, as the chief has noted, that have expressed an interest, then I would urge us to bring together, our stable of informed first responders to sit down and have those always difficult discussions to say, can we think about this new idea and have the right people considering it and then coming back to you with a recommendation if it makes sense to advance. As we understand it, the monetary advantages supported by the state continue to be in a lockbox, dedicated to provide communities that come together, these kinds of services. And so the idea has not diminished over time in terms of its value to at least explore it. So, that on the behalf of the police commission is asking this board of selectmen, do not surrender, your process and engagement, to an organization as helpful as it might be as the SCOG, when in fact there's a more relevant, timely process that involves individuals, from Madison in terms of our first responders who have the most valuable input and influence over, does this idea make sense? Do not surrender that timetable to some other uncertain entity that may or may not take months or longer to even build some level of trust and understanding to advance the evaluation of this idea. So that's where the police commission is on this subject.
So I think these can be done on parallel paths.
I
had
agree.
conversations with the first selectman. I think the difference, Ed, from maybe what it had been a few years ago is the partners weren't ready to have those conversations either, or potential dance partners, so to speak, right? And there has been a change in mindset, I think, across the region as well as with our neighbors, because I think a lot of people are facing, either capital investment, recruiting issues. And I want to, allay fears, who for our dispatch staff as well, that I think this is a tough job to get good staffing. And so offering a larger organization that has a lot of career potential, I think will be seen as a positive ultimately by our staff. We will be looking out for them clearly as we go through this process, but this isn't an intention to somehow, reduce. I think there'll be opportunities for people to work with whatever this organization ends up evolving into if we do some sort of regionalization. So staffing is an issue these days, maintaining staffing. Capital investment has gone up significantly. So that's where I think more towns are open to having those conversations now as we go forward. So I think there's great, this is a good time, right? And I think the plan will be to do a parallel kind of process to review options in the COG and then outside of the COG, and to see what makes the most sense for us going forward. And as I said, are we looking at being the hub of that? And we also made a big investment in our communications tower here, and so trying to leverage some of the investment the town has already made. Or is it turning into some other kind of completely different model going forward? And that will come out of, I think, the COG analysis as well. If the board is good, I just wanted to kind of have a conversation about that. So, it's always been a sensitive topic, and we want to make sure people understand that we're doing this open, transparent, and, there'll be more information to come on this as we move forward in the review process. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Ed, and thank you,
Thanks.
Chief. And I think with that, then, I guess, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Citizens' comments.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah. Citizens' comments.
There
Sorry.
are none.
Okay. We're going twice. I don't see any hands. All right, with that then, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, all in favor, say aye, and thank you
Aye.
very much.
Aye.
A very
Aye.
extensive today. Thanks. Bye-bye.